So that's a good place to start. This meeting is being recorded, and just for context there, the reason we're recording it is because anybody who isn't able to get to it tonight from the community, particularly who wants to find out answers to questions, they can get a copy of this recording. So welcome everybody. And this is the online event that's being convened by Latrobe City Council with support from Bushfire Recovery Victoria and a whole range of other state agencies have been involved in the recovery and the cleanup. My name is Steve Ray. I'm from an organisation called the Group Work Centre, and I'm here today as a kind of independent facilitator of the session. I kind of will be directing traffic and making sure everyone gets an opportunity to speak. So I'm an impartial, independent voice so that everybody gets that opportunity to be heard. So that's my role today. I'm not involved in the content, just to make sure that we use the space well and really hear each other well. Perhaps it would be good just to very quickly, in that vein, in terms of hearing each other well, technology can be our friend or it can not be. So if you're not used to technology, particularly in this, look at that. There's some Zoom tips that have been shared. Thank you very much, whoever's sharing those. Muting your microphone, very helpful in between actually speaking. Sometimes there's background noise without us realizing it. You can turn off your video, turn on your video. Great to have them on, as I said, if it's possible to, just to help with the connection. And other things as well that you may want to look at. But the main ones, the muting, and also down the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to see this even without that screen share going on. You'll see there's a participants box, a chat box, and some other things there. There's also a reactions box. And when it comes time to, if you click on that now, actually, you'll see there's a number of things you can do. The one at the bottom is a key one, that's raising hand. If you want to ask a question, and at any time, please use that. Just makes it much easier for us to see you, because you'll be moved up in the screen, up onto the top left, and we can see you from there. But we're also picking up people who just raise their physical hand as well, of course. So we'll got lots of eyes looking out, so we shouldn't miss anybody. Okay, we can probably leave that slide now and come back to the main group and see you all. Excellent. Yes, I guess, just in terms of using the space well, just being conscious of sharing the airspace. You may have a particularly important issue that you do want to be known and to get something done about it. Please let us hear about that. But also just be aware of others in the room so that we can make sure that everyone gets that opportunity to speak. Before we go any further, I'm going to, and I'll get to the agenda for the day, but I'm going to pass to Carmel Flynn, the Chief Executive of BRV, to officially welcome us here and just open the session. So over to you, Carmel.
Thanks, Steve. And yes, it's hi everyone, I'm Carmel Flynn. I'm the Acting CEO of Bushfire Recovery Victoria, and I'll give a little bit more information about my role and BRV in just a few minutes. But for now, I would like to warmly welcome everybody to the meeting today. And like many of the agencies and the council here, and I know community members here today, BRV is very committed to reconciliation and to Aboriginal people self-determining their recovery from natural disasters. And in that vein, I would like to acknowledge the Brayakulan people of the Gunai-Kurnai Nation, who are the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. And I'd like to pay my deepest respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I also would like to acknowledge other elders and Aboriginal people who are with us here today. So thank you, and back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Carmel. Fantastic. So let's just go to the purpose of today. It's essentially to continue this joint effort of dealing with the fallout of the huge storm event back on June the 9th when so many people's lives in your community, you specifically, were affected in so many different ways. Businesses, farms, local communities have taken such a big hit, and that's on top of other things that you've been dealing with, including bushfires and, of course, COVID. So this is really a place to give you an opportunity to speak and to find ways forward that are going to work for you and can happen in partnership, in collaboration with the various agencies who are here to answer questions and to kind of nut out what's going to be the best solutions. So it's really 3 objectives, I guess, to give you that opportunity. And that's the key one. First, we're going to hear some updates of what's occurred since that storm event, including just a bit of a synopsis of the actual event itself. And it's been a while, it's over 3 months now since that event. And if you were particularly affected in that, when we hear from Russell from the SES, he gives us a really good but detailed account of what happened. Some of that might be, hard to hear. So just to kind of get ready for that, because there's a lot of information about the nature of the storms and the seriousness of the event, but it's also very helpful, of course. So we'll hear those updates. And then, of course, I guess towards the end, it's a big reminder that whatever questions can be answered tonight will be, but this is the beginning of a process, beginning of a conversation, really, and the next steps forward are also critical to make sure that whatever needs to happen can happen. So I've mentioned there's a lot of agencies who are here in the background, here to ask or answer questions if need be. More importantly than the people who are here to support you are you, the people from the community, and it would be just a great opportunity if you'd like to step into the space now and just, say hi, where you're from, and just really how you're going, what part of Latrobe City you're ringing in from. Anybody want to kick off? You can even talk about, what's brought you along here. We've kind of done that a bit informally as people were arriving, but if there's anybody who would just like to say hi, be great.
Steve, I'm happy to go. So my name's Michelle. I live at 9 George Street, so we're back right onto the creek. We've built a new property, and we were thankful that we followed the council and West Gippsland Catchment Authority regulations in building our property. So I suppose I'm just here to, as a resident, to learn my background. I'm doing some work in bushfire recovery space in East Gippsland, so I've had some learnings along the way with that. And just here, I suppose, to hear what the future directions are in terms of the broader recovery.
Fantastic. Thanks for kicking us off, Michelle. Were you directly affected in any way as part of those storms?
Look, I suppose it's all relative. We've got some fences that are getting fixed that my husband's working at and designing so that they might not fall over. We've got some things out, garden, but compared to our neighbours, I would say not really. But obviously we did experience the event. Got some nice aerial photos of our house in the middle of, surrounded by water. So we're much more fortunate than many others. I understand that totally.
Thank you. Anybody else like to share something? And feel free just to put your hand up. You can also use the chat if you're also, like to. And as Ingrid has here, thanks, Ingrid. Good to have you here. And presumably you're here to find out what's happened and what's going to happen going forward as well. If you've got any questions or you'd like to kind of share any stories, this is an opportunity to do that as well. Anyone else? Very shy today. It might be because we're getting close to the end of the week. All right, well, we'll keep moving. We will hear these updates, but yes, we'll get to directly that time when we would love to hear your, your questions, but also the sharing of experiences. One of the things that is so crucial here is to find out from you, because you're the people at the coalface. You were the ones who had the experience, and this is about kind of discovering blind spots, things that weren't done so well. So please, feel free to share that, so that those kind of things that can be remedied and going forward can be, ensure that they don't happen, or at least they can be catered for. Okay, and Robin, thank you from Latrobe City. Just you're here to listen, and that's fantastic. All right, let's keep going then. I'm going to go back to our agenda and just give you a quick overview of what's going to happen. We're going to officially, we'll close here at 7, and we're going to hear from the Emergency Management Commissioner, Andrew Crisp, who's here for a short period of time. He's dealing with a whole lot of other emergencies, as you can imagine, with COVID around right now. But we're lucky to have him here for a short period of time. We're going to also hear from Carmel Flynn, again, formally from BRV, and we'll get an update from her and the role of BRV. And then we'll hear, as I mentioned before, from Russell from the SES to give us an overview of the storm event itself and its significance. And then before we then come to you, the community will hear from Steve Piacenti, the Chief Executive from Latrobe, just an overview of the impact and some of the recovery works that have been going on. So then, of course, to you, that's where the bulk of the time will be spent, to hear your questions, your experiences and insights, and things that haven't gone so well, things that may have gone brilliantly. We've heard in a few of these meetings where both of those things are true. And so whatever your experience has been, please, feel free to share. I'm going to throw it to you, Andrew, for your presentation, and it's great to have you here.
Thanks very much, Steve, and thank you, Carmel, for that strong acknowledgement of country and traditional owners. To I believe the Mayor's on there, Sharon Gibson, I saw there, and councillors, and Steve and your team. I'd like to acknowledge again your efforts, not just only during this event, but post the event, and the work you continue to do in support of your communities. Again, my friend and colleague Carmel and Kane and the BRV team, and then my emergency services and others that play a critical role in keeping our community safe, but then really you, the community members, and that's, as Steve has highlighted tonight, is about you, and it's about the opportunity for us to listen to what you have to say. From all our emergency events, it is critical that we do learn. There are things that we do well, there are things that we do extremely well, there are other things that we have not done as well, and there's always an opportunity to learn. So that's really what drives me in terms of my role, but attending meetings such as this. I want to basically give you some assurance that all your comments, all your questions, all your insights will be picked up from this particular meeting, and they are all important, and they will feed into a very formal framework that we've developed in relation to reviewing events of the 9th and 10th and post what happened in June. So I'm sure I will hear comments and questions about various parts. I think will fit into some themes where we're doing specific pieces of work. But if there's things that we've missed that we need to pick up, then that's one of the reasons that I'm here to listen. So around that, some might recall I stood up in a press conference down in Traralgon only a few days after the event, and I said there would be an after-action review in relation to public information and warnings. So that's a specific piece of work that will be undertaken, and it will be led by a consultant that we've engaged to do that work, who's got significant experience in relation to emergency management. that person has started work and has had actually looked at all the warnings and the public information messages that went out in relation to this particular event. The next phase of her work will be to engage with a number of key stakeholders, and Steve Piacente, your CEO, is one of those key people to better understand that how do we then connect into the community more broadly to again listen to what the community has to say. So that will be the third phase of that particular piece of work. We've also engaged a marketing company that will undertake a community sentiment piece across the whole event. And again, a whole range of different interviews will be conducted to ensure that we can listen as best as possible to those that want to have a say in relation to this event. Then there were very much some other themes. You know, some of you would experience a number of these. So we know there are issues in relation to energy, you know, the power supply, the number of people that were off, and the significant period of time that some of those people were off, and possibly even including yourselves. We know that had an impact on telecommunications. So again, different departments are leading specific pieces of work around that. We know there was a significant impact in relation to our roads and transport systems. So another piece of work around that. Then we'll also pick up as part of this overall framework, what we would normally do. So, you know, at state level, so you know, at state control centre, regional level, incident level, different emergency services agencies are also undergoing their various debriefs, and as no doubt local government and other organisations. So we do an absolute best to pick all that up. We've got people will be offline for the next 6 months working on this, pulling together those themes and trends, which will finish in 2 documents, and one of those will be a public-facing document. So that's the formal process that we will be working through to provide feedback to the community, but to inform us, as I said, about what we can do better in the future. I'm happy to leave it there, Steve, and listen to the other presentations. And apologies, I do have a COVID meeting at 6:30, but I'll definitely be staying on until 6:30.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for that, Andrew. Just wanted to mention, which I didn't mention before, one of the things is having all of these people in front of you in that gallery view. You can also go up to the top right of your screen and you can change that view to a speaker view if you're not aware of that. That can be particularly helpful when someone's presenting, as Andrew was there, and you just can see them so much more clearly, and you know, kind of breaks the trance of Zoom, which can, you know, break our concentration and focus. So please feel free to just experiment with that. Just keeps you more engaged. Just wanted to draw your attention to the chat, the name of all the agencies that are here, able to support and answer questions throughout the night. We've got Latrobe City Council, obviously, Bushfire Recovery Victoria, Emergency Management Victoria, we just heard from Andrew, the State Emergency Service, of course, Ambulance Victoria, West Gippsland Catchment Management Authority, Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, Parks Victoria, Department of Families, Fairness and Housing, Country Fire Authority, Agricultural Victoria and the Red Cross. So a huge number of organisations who have already been involved in many ways, and some of them you would have perhaps come across as part of the recovery already. So just know that they're there and available to answer questions later on. I'm going to now throw to you, Carmel, from the BRV, from Chief Executive of the BRV, to give us a little bit more of a context about why Bushfire Recovery would be involved in this whole process for those of you who don't know their wider role. Over to you, Carmel.
Thanks, Steve. And I'd also like to acknowledge and introduce my colleague, Kane Trist, who's with us here tonight. And Kane's the Regional Director for BRV for the City of Latrobe and the nearby shires. And I'd also like to acknowledge Cassandra Elliott, who is a BRV colleague who's driving the Zoom meeting and really providing a lot of help in the background. I would also like to say to the community members here today, you know, to acknowledge the efforts that you did in the immediate aftermath of the Storm and Floods event. I was able to visit the area just after the storm, and could see the devastation and the impact on those who live near the creek, and could see the work that was being done by community members, which was just an enormous task, and would like to acknowledge those efforts and understand too that many community members also reached out to neighbours and friends and loved ones and helped others in that circumstance as well. And to our council colleagues, who I know have been working tirelessly over the past weeks also to support community recovery and the efforts. Thank you, and we will continue to work and partner with you in support of your affected communities. Just a little bit about BRV. We're a state agency. We're part of the emergency management system. If you'd like to think of agencies in emergency management as having roles before emergencies, during emergencies, and after emergencies, BRV is a state agency that has a role after emergencies in recovery, and we operate under a delegation from the Emergency Management Commissioner, Andrew. So after the 2019-20 fires, Andrew delegated to BRV the role to assist bushfire affected communities, and the most affected were those in East Gippsland and those in the northeast of our state. And we continue to work closely with the shires of East Gippsland and Tauranga and Alpine and those communities, because recovery from large-scale emergencies such as the fires of last year, but also from the floods this year, which we'll hear from Russell, were a really significant event, takes weeks and months and often years. And so BRV was established as a dedicated and permanent agency to work really closely with communities and their local governments. And our role is to engage locally, to partner with local governments, to listen to communities and their recovery needs, and to make sure that we're amplifying the voice of community and local governments into state government so that our efforts are aligned to what communities need. We have a role in coordinating the many organisations and departments and agencies, particularly at the state level, that have a role in assisting recovery, so that local governments and communities don't have to think about going individually to the 60 or more organisations that have roles in recovery. They can instead come straight through to BRV, and we're the one-stop shop that can be a navigation to different areas that we think can provide some assistance for what's needed. And we also do deliver some services, such as at the moment we're working with the Johns Lyng Group to deliver a statewide coordinated cleanup program following the storms and flood event. So our role here is in support of the City of Latrobe, and we're working closely with Steve and his team and Gail and the team to help navigate interstate government, but particularly if we're coming across problems that might involve multiple organisations that need to come to the table to help solve them, where we're available to help sort of bring those agencies to the table to look at how they can work together to solve some of the larger problems that are affecting communities after the storm and floods. I think I just might pause there and say, if there are any questions tonight on either the statewide cleanup program in regards to private properties or of recovery where we're not sure which agency might be responsible, and in fact sometimes there are gaps in responsibilities, then Kane and I are happy to jump in and to see how we can help. So thank you. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Carmel. And yeah, good point to mention that there are no stupid questions. All questions are going to be received with an open mind, because often there are things that are revealed from questions that might seem to you not to be important or significant. So anything that has been an issue to you is a really important thing to bring into that question time. All right, I'm now going to pass on to Russell from the SES, who's going to give us this overview. Over to you, Russell. You're on mute, Russell.
Thanks, Steve. I was just sharing my screen. Is that?
Yeah, that's terrific.
You can see it now? Okay,
That's
terrific.
really good.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So good evening, community members, Latrobe City Mayor, CEO, councillors, Latrobe City staff, the Emergency Management Commissioner, BRV and other agencies. Welcome tonight. And I'd also like to acknowledge Anthony McLean, the Vic SES Assistant Chief Officer for Gippsland, and also Jane Fontana, who's the Community Resilience Coordinator for SES. They're both online tonight to hear from the community. This is a small little bit of a presentation just to sort of set the scene before we go into to the other parts of the agenda. And I'll start off with a picture here that you can see that was taken on the 9th from the bombs radar. So we can see a significant weather event about to hit Gippsland. We always start off with our presentations with sharing the Vic SES values, and the one that comes to mind this evening is we are part of our community, and that's what we're here for tonight, to hear from you. So the background on this particular incident, most people would be familiar with it, but I'll just run through a few key points. So throughout the night of Wednesday, the 9th of June, and into the following day, Victoria experienced a severe weather event with strong winds and heavy rain, which subsequently caused widespread damage, flooding and power outages. What would now unfold would be the busiest 24 hours in the history of Vic SES, with over 9,000 requests for assistance in one single week. And that's a large amount of jobs for us. An initial flood watch for Gippsland was issued on Tuesday, the 8th of June, with rainfall totals of 60 to 100 expected across the flood watch area through Wednesday and Thursday, and then with a further 150 to 250 likely about the ranges. And the focus of this heaviest rainfall would be across West and South Gippsland. The Bureau of Meteorology warned that 19 catchments could be impacted with minor to moderate flooding expected across West Gippsland and the Mitchell River catchment from late Wednesday evening, and indicated to us that there would be major flooding possible. On top of that, there was a severe weather warning for damaging winds, which were destructive, as we know, which was issued on Wednesday, the 9th of June for West and South Gippsland and parts of East Gippsland. So as you can see now, the event is building. A severe weather warning for heavy rainfall then impacted on the other two warnings, which was issued on Wednesday, the 9th of June for heavy rainfall, again across West Gippsland and Central Highlands. And on top of that, there was the East Coast low, which would deliver heavy rain leading to flooding and damaging destructive winds, and it had multiple centres which would influence the location and timing of this heavy rain. So we didn't see it in the far east or the east, and it moved to South and West Gippsland. And as I said before, some of the 24-hour totals there were 70 to 120, 150 to 200. And as we already knew, the catchments were already saturated across much of West and South Gippsland and wet to moderately wet through East Gippsland. In relation to the warning, so it was very dynamic. And as you can see from some of the ones I picked out here in the sequential order, from the 9th of June was an initial major flood was issued for the McAllister at 3:52, another major for the Thompson at 4:19, another major for the Avon at 4:27, a moderate for Terralgan Creek at 4:43, a moderate for the Mitchell River, 5:43, and then, of course, as we know, the major flood warning for Terralgan Creek issued at 1:59 a.m. on Thursday the 10th. So there was quite a bit of activity going on. As part of this and moving into the operation, the Victorian Government declared a state energy emergency after flooding caused cracking at the Yallourn Power Station. There were V-line trains on the Gippsland line between Terralgan and Bairnsdale that were suspended. And of course, then we had the beach erosion, which caused some swells to impact the Gippsland beaches. And there's a particular slide there. So those people that are looking at their Vic Emergency app, at one stage on the 9th going into the 10th would have seen all those different shades of colours with all the warnings out. The daily rainfall totals for Victoria. So a picture tells 1,000 words, and this is just a slide to indicate the rainfall on the right and the colours on the map there. And as you can see, we did get quite a bit of rain over the 200 mil plus. I'll just flick on the rainfall magnitudes across the region. So this particular slide here, it's the locations of the rain gauges are on the left, and then we've got the dates across the top. So the 9th, 10th and 11th. And then of course, we've got the ARI, which is the average recurrence interval, and the AEP, which is the annual exceedance probability. The rain gauges there indicate for Mount Baw 280 mil on the 10th of June. There was 181 at Erica, 137 at Ballara. So there was quite a bit of rain, and in the Warragul Gazette, they reported over 204 millimetres in less than 24 hours at Walhalla. The river flows across the region. So this particular one is just to show you a bit of a snapshot. The river systems on the left again, where their gauges are, the dates, which are predominantly around the 10th and 11th, the time that those rivers peaked, at what height and what flood class level. So again, we can see we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 majors going on, 4 moderates and some minors all at one particular time. So a very dynamic time with a lot of river systems in major and moderate and peaking. The warnings issued, again, you can see there from the 8th of June to the 14th of June, there was 289 warnings just issued in that small amount of time. From advice messages, there you can see in the yellow, to the moderate, major and severe weather warnings. Quite a few moderates, 56, 33 majors. There was an emergency warning, which was for major flood warning. So there was 13 of those. There was 16 evacuate now, and then there was some all clear and some safe to returns, obviously, after the evacuate now. So quite a number of warnings over that period of time. The region impacts, so this particular event impacted 5 of our LGAs across the 6 that we've got here in Gippsland, which included 48 regional towns that were impacted. A significant number of communities were isolated, some for several days, and we heard that from one of the meetings last night for Wellington. It was quite some time. Access was cut to most roads and major highways by either flooding or trees down, which compacted the isolation of local communities, and that didn't assist with emergency services and our partner agencies trying to get to people's homes to help. Widespread power and telecommunication outages, over 200,000 at one particular time. In relation to stock losses, 552, pasture and crop losses, large, 245 tonnes of hay lost, 356 kilometres of fencing destroyed, and there was a large amount of infrastructure that was lost, up to 52. At the same time, we saw damage to roads and bridges through erosion, a number of landslides and trees down. At the start of the incident, we counted 196 road closures that were reported through across Regional Roads Victoria and coming in through the local government authorities. Parks and state forests were closed, including Wilson's Prom. And again, storm damage from fallen trees and damaged road infrastructure and landslides affected some of the busiest roads through Gippsland, including the Strzelecki Ranges, the Great Alpine Road, Borbor Tourist Road, Borbor National Park, which was the Mount Guinier Road, and the state forest around Thompson Dam. The plantation, HPE plantation, had a number of trees just ripped up and pulled over. And as we know, there was residential properties which were impacted with above 4 flooding, commercial properties also impacted by the same, and there was communities that were evacuated. Some of the community impacts that you would be familiar with was that we saw rapid rises in water levels in Terrelgan Creek, which caused many houses and businesses close to Terrelgan Creek to be impacted by overflow and yard flooding. There was many roads inundated. There was inundation at the Terrelgan Recreation Reserve and Tennis Club, and large parts of Victory Park and Bert Thompson Reserve were underwater. The Mantra Car Park at Terrelgan flooded, the plaza, large areas of farmland were inundated. Many flood rescues were performed. I think there was 57 just in Terrelgan. Trees uprooted and debris and mud everywhere. Communities isolated and roads blocked. So it's quite a bit of impact to yourselves as the community members of Terrelgan. In relation to SES's response, there was 1,185 requests for assistance between the 9th of June and the 13th of June. And the majority of those were trees down, building damage, flooding and flood rescues. The response was a multi-agency response from all our key partner agencies. And again, we sent incident management team staff and resources from other parts of the SES regions, from Southwest, Midwest. Central regions were also deployed into Gippsland region ahead of the forecasted flooding. And the Bairnsdale and Terrelgan incident control centres were stood up and staffed and operated 24/7. Across those 5 days, just SES volunteers, so this isn't the hours that other community members across the Trobe, but this is the 17,363 SES volunteers hours just over those 5 days. We had really good extensive support from business communities and community members of the Trobe City to support volunteers in the Incident Control Centre, which was fantastic. There was Forest Fire Management, there was DELP crews and other tree army that assessed impacts and facilitated safe access and egress for communities and essential services due to those road blockages. And a road planning and operations cell was activated at the Incident Control Centre just to manage the road recovery across Gippsland, given the amount of road closures and damage. And that's it, Steve. Just a quick broad overview of some of the impacts to the community that are on tonight and across the Gippsland region.
Thanks so much, Russell. Fantastic to get that overview. Huge amount of information there. And fear not, people, if you would like to see that presentation is available on Council's website. Cass, just put that into the chat. Yes, wow, just looking at those figures again, it's just quite shocking to see some of those rainfall figures and the warnings. How the SES with all their volunteers, that was a huge response. What was it? More than 17,000 hours. 17,000 hours, is that right? It's huge.
Over 17,000 over the 5 days, but if someone was to calculate the amount of other volunteer and community group volunteer hours, it would be substantial, I think, Steve. So a credit to the Latrobe City community, and it was a great big task, and we all pulled together and got the job done. So it was great. And I look forward to listening and learning from some of the community members tonight.
And you're right, we've heard a lot from the community in the past about just how many things that they did that were just not recorded at all, in terms of essentially doing those same kind of jobs, making sure people had either food or were looked after when they were struggling during that time. So incredible effort. And
we even heard last night from the Wellington group that people were moving cows from one farm to another just so they could be milked, because farmers were without power. So that was a substantial job in itself.
Yeah. Thanks, Russell, for that reminder. And also, I mean, that goes to the role tonight of anybody from the community. If you've got any of those kind of stories, they can be actually quite helpful in terms of getting a bigger picture of what was going on. I'm going to now hand to Steve Piacenti from the Latrobe City, the Chief Executive. Over to you, Steve, to give an update on what the council's been involved with as part of Storm.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks everyone for coming along. I'd just like to acknowledge all the people who are in attendance from the agencies tonight. So thanks to Carmel, Bushfire Recovery Victoria for helping coordinate tonight's event, and Andrew, Chris and Russell have spoken, so thank you both, and all the other government agencies. Also like to acknowledge a number of councils here tonight. I think most of them, in fact, have turned up, so I want to hear what you have to say. So our mayors here, Councillor Sharon Gibson, Councillor Clancy, Councillor Harriman, Councillor Howe, Callaghan, and Councillor Middlemas. So thank you. But importantly, I suppose I want to keep my update fairly short to give you as much time as possible, the community to have opportunity to have a say tonight and hear from you. So look, and you would know better than I in the community some of the challenges that have thrown up from this event, and obviously on top of that a pandemic. It's already been touched on, so it has been a pretty tumultuous time, so that's an understatement. So I will touch on just a few things that have been happening from a council perspective. So firstly, as you would know, that Traralgon Creek had the largest flood on that waterway since 1978, I've been told. In fact, the devastation across the city, my staff have told me, and the cleanup that's been associated with this event, not just within Traralgon, but the broader event in the city in terms of storm cleanup, has been the most significant that some of my employees have seen. So that footprint of the flood impact, though, was quite significant, particularly in Traralgon and some of the rural areas in terms of farms and the like that have been flooded. So we've supported over 700 people and 900 families who registered with us at relief centres, initially in Traralgon, then in Yanar. A number of assessments have been done, 720 assessments of properties and the like, including flood impacted and storm impacted residents. Pleasingly, I know the Mayor and I did meet with the Gippsland Emergency Relief Fund very early on in the event, and they set up their fund, and they've processed over $645,000 worth of grants, the majority of those within Latrobe City, the vast majority. There were some in some other municipalities, but quite significant funding they were able to deliver very quickly, which was pleasing to see. And there was also, as you would be well aware, people in Traralgon, significant damage to community facilities in Victory Park and Traralgon Tennis Club and the Traralgon Recreation Reserve. So there's some recovery required. There's part of planning around those, which we're working through. Our road impact, our road network was significantly impacted more so by the storm event in terms of trees down and landslides and the like, and that happened in the rural parts of the municipality. And our teams did work pretty hard in terms of getting a response happening earlier on in the event, working extended hours, removing trees and clearing roads, as well as setting up roadblocks and then reopening roads at the request of the emergency service agencies and the like. So obviously that immediate focus supporting the agencies who control the event to get those things done in terms of egress and exits of property. So those people in Traralgon might have had the opportunity if they chose to receive a hard waste collection. So we did try hard to communicate that. That was set up for impacted residents, green waste disposal and the like. And we collected over 24 tonnes. I do acknowledge that some property owners might have used their insurance company, have done things themselves. It was something that we made available. And I also did see a number of community members, some of whom are on the screen tonight, out in the community cleaning up and helping others. That's already sort of been touched on a bit. That was great to see. And it does happen during events, as most people would know. People help each other out and just get on with getting the job done. So that was amazing to see that happening from a community perspective. So we also had free green waste disposal. We had a number of property owners, over 100 that accessed that. So fairly significant event for us, and it was great to see the community come together. Would like to thank my staff and obviously the community and all the people, emergency responders and the like, that helped during the event. We support in the initial phase of the event people who might need to be relocated or find a temporary accommodation. So we did some of that as part of this event. Others, though, just would have gone to family and friends and do what they do in terms of supporting them. But there were some people who we did support through that process, and that initial funding has obviously dried up now in terms of being available. We are still helping others, some in the community, broader community, with some of that support. So particularly with the establishment of Bushfire Recovery Victoria as part of this event, that's something new for us. So we'll continue to work with them as the coordinating agency across the broader event across Victoria. And we continue to we're hopeful we will support working with them as part of this recovery process. From me, I suppose thanks to all of the teams that in the community that participated, helped support the event. We do have, and we have had set up an email address dedicated. That's flood2021@latrobe.vic.gov.au, or people can just contact us through our normal communications channels in our office to get access to information, or if they need to contact us. I suppose this event as well tonight and others that we've had, it's a good opportunity for people to contact with us and ask questions. We've got our emergency management team will be able to help, and we've also got our website, which I think in the chat there's already been some commentary put up about some access to information that's already been shared tonight, but there's also more information on our website about the flood and storm recovery event. So I'll leave it there, Steve. I think we did have some questions come in. I'm not sure if you want me to go to some of the pre-prepared ones that people had sent in. I did think, if you're happy for me to continue, there was a couple of people on the screen. I think Ingrid, not sure if that's Ingrid Snell. Is that the same Ingrid on the screen? Moving forward, I think Ingrid's nodding. I just saw Ingrid on the screen, but I had a question from Ingrid Snell. So I'll start with that one if you like, which was about wanting to know whether house values would remain at the same price given the flood event from the moment. Would you be getting a rate reduction as you've not been able to live in the house since the flood? So the way the valuation system works is the valuation was actually set at the start of the year by the Valuer General. So they do an annual valuation. And so what's been sent out in our rates notices, which you might have received just recently, will be based on that valuation. If there's a subsequent change to that valuation for next year, that would have an impact. But I will ask my team to talk to the Valuer General to see whether they would be coming back. Like the Valuer General through the state government do revaluations of new properties that come online throughout the year. So it's something we can ask them about, well, would they look at this particular matter in terms of a revaluation due to flood impacts if somebody's had to vacate their property or demolish it or part of it thereof. So it's something we can ask them to have a look at. But from next year, if there is a change, that would definitely flow through when they do their updated valuations for next year. Importantly, I would add, we do have financial hardship assistance through council. So if somebody is in a situation where they're suffering financial hardship, they can seek to access support through council in terms of their payment arrangements and the like for their rates. So I hope that helps explain the situation. Probably something we still need to follow up though with the Valuer General about whether they would come back and revalue properties as an interim step or whether they need to wait until next year.
Thanks, Steve. How does that go for you, Ingrid? Is that a sufficient answer to that question? Yep, got the head nod. Excellent. Thank you. There was another question that came in too, which was about the warning system in the Traralgon Creek, whether or not it still exists. It was installed in the early 90s to give prior warning to the event of a flood. And the question is, who's responsible for the maintenance of the creek as well? So I guess there's two questions there: the warning system and the maintenance of the creek. There's a lot of debris in it. Is there anybody who wanted to take charge of that question, have a first go at it?
I can give it a bit of a go. I think it was Andrew. It might have been on the screen before. I was just checking whether Andrew was.
Oh, yes. Oh, is that
name in the chat? You mentioned he used to work at Latrobe City before.
Andrew McIntosh. Yes. Welcome, Andrew.
Assuming it's the same Andrew. I'm not sure if his camera's on. So in terms of the flood warning system, that does exist. So there's a number of, was there three flow gauges, sorry, I'm trying to get the right terminology, and 8 rain gauges that exist as part of that network. And that data from the flow gauges, I understand, Lance King's on the call, he's probably more au fait with the exact detail of it from my team, but that data goes to the Bureau of Meteorology, as I understand, so it is still in action, and that information is then provided through to Emergency Management Victoria in terms of warnings and the like, as I understand it. So so the answer to that part of the question was yes, it still does exist and it is still utilised.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Did you want to add to that, Lance, at all?
So that information is available on the BOM website, and that's the river flows and rainfalls in relation to that. And that information feeds into the flood plan, and the River Heights allows the agencies to make informed decisions about the amount of rainfall that falls on the landscape and the impact that it eventually has in Traralgon. And flood studies have been done around that, which that information also informs.
Right. Does it, and this is a question, I guess it's an interpretation of the question in terms of immediate warnings to people to let them know to get out of the place. Presumably it must feed into that, does it?
As such, as a warning from the system, no. Right. Previously, we would use that information, and that's the stuff that Andrew was talking about years ago, prior to EMV coming into place, where the current arrangements are for the incident controller to give the warnings, the community warnings. So that's where that responsibility lays. So an emergency alert is a system that they use to do on-the-ground warnings, and that sets off everyone's phones and mobiles and landlines. Okay. So, but the information that comes through the flood warning system can inform the incident controller for those alerts.
Right. Thanks, Lance. I'm not sure, Andrew, if there was any follow-up question in relation to that, or if that had been answered sufficiently from both Steve and Lance. Did you want to say anything more to that? Yeah. Either in the chat or you can put your hand. Oh, and Cheryl from Red Cross, have you got a question in relation to that, or is this another issue?
Well, I'll speak as Cheryl, not as Red Cross. I helped write the flood warning booklet that came out in the mid-1990s. And back then, every household that would be impacted by the flood got one of those flood booklets. And if anyone new moved in, a book was automatically sent to that address. But what happened then was when a flood event was going to happen, your mobile phone and house phone would ring. If the house phone didn't answer, it would go to your mobile. And no matter where you were in Australia or in the world, you got that message that you are about to be impacted. Therefore, if you were on holidays in Queensland, you could get someone to sandbag the front of your house, etc. That is what a lot of the residents around here were expecting, and there were no SMS messages, no warnings whatsoever. So that is what a lot of the community around here is wondering what happened to that.
Thank you so much. Does anybody want to pick that up? Because that gets quite specific now as to what happened there, if that was an expectation.
Lance again here, Steve.
Yes.
In relation to that system became redundant many years ago because of the emergency alert system and the arrangements around informing community then became the responsibility of the incident controller. So that superseded the old system that was in place.
That, if I can answer to that, thanks Lance for that, but the trouble is the residents were not informed that a new system had taken place and how to access the new system.
Is that something that needs to happen? I guess that's this is why we're having this conversation, because these kind of things where there are gaps potentially, and as a member of the community, that's what you're saying from the sounds of things, Cheryl. That's
Steve, the old system was an opt-in system where council managed that process, but with the state arrangements in place, as I said, that superseded that, and they could send out a message to anyone in a polygon, which is a mapped area, and send the flood warning message to there. So, and I suppose this will be picked up in the review by the Commissioner's consultant.
And he's just put his hand up to answer that. So what you're saying does make sense. Andrew.
Yeah, exactly to that point, Stephen. Like, it's useful for me to listen to this feedback, and I've already received similar feedback from other community members before this meeting tonight. So this is exactly what will be picked up as part of that review. Like, it's about public information and it's about warnings.
Fantastic. Thanks, Cheryl. Very helpful. And I believe Ken Skinner wants to ask a question. Did you want to, I'm just going to cut straight to you. I can see you're having problems putting the hand up, but over to you,
yes,
Ken.
I was just trying to work out how to put my hand up, and somebody's answered to click the more button, and I can't see a more button. So there's a few comments that I'd like to make within that, and that was a lot of people that I spoke to were actually expecting a text message, which was what the past system was. There was one downside of the Polygon text messages is that if a farmer had a property in the flood zone but lived out of that polygon, then he didn't get a warning. But I think that was basically can be superseded by the EMV app, the app that gives the emergency warning system, provided that person knows how to use it and has a warning system around the area that he needs the warnings for.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken. Did you want to add anything? Was there any other questions? You said you had a couple of comments. Were there others?
I'll have a couple of comments later. I'll bring them up when they're relevant, I think.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. Cheryl's got your hand up again, yes? And then we'll go to Michelle.
Yes, as a resident, I'd like to bring to the attention of probably Vic Rhodes or somebody, very early in the morning when it was still dark, the SES and CFA fire trucks were at the end of Tennyson Street on Shakespeare Street. So any cars coming along Shakespeare Street, which is Highland Highway, were stopped and sent down Tennyson Street. Well, at my driveway on the first house, that's where the floodwater was. So they're all looking and going, oh, floodwater, can't drive through floodwater, trying to do a U-turn and go back out onto Shakespeare Street. The only problem was a B-double truck came down, a fuel tanker, and he had no option. He couldn't reverse the 800 metres with cars behind him to go back down Shakespeare Street. He had to go down Tennyson Street, which was already flooded. How he got out the other end, I do not know, because it was already up to the top of the tyres on cars down the end of Shakespeare Street. But by him going down, sent a great big wave bow into all the properties. And what they really need to do is stop traffic at the roundabout. So big trucks, semis, etc., which are a lot that have come past here, need to be turned around at the roundabout where it's logical for a truck to be able to turn. There is no way known a big truck can turn around in any of the spaces down here.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you for that piece of on-ground intel. I'm sure that's been captured as all these comments are. So thank you for that.
Well, it happens every time there is a flood. It's the same problem every time.
Right. And you've brought it up before?
Yes.
Yeah. Were you affected directly by that bow wave? That sounds pretty shocking.
No, I'm right at the very beginning, but down the end, like the level was up at window level or windscreen level of the cars. That's how high it was.
Wow, that's incredible. Anybody from either the Road Authority or Council want to pick up on that? And then I'll go to you, Michelle. In fact, I'll go to you now, Michelle, given you've got your hand up, and anybody who would like to pick up on Cheryl's point there, please do so.
Thanks, Steve. I suppose I just wanted to, prior to moving to Traralgon, we lived in Hazelwood North, and I suppose what struck me was when we lived in Hazelwood North in a rural thing, we had a bushfire plan and we had an evacuation plan, and despite the fact that we live right on the back of the Traralgon Creek, you know, I learnt pretty quickly when things were happening that we didn't actually have a flood plan that was written up. And I think there was lots of things that I didn't understand. Certainly my husband follows and looks at the warnings that Lance and others were talking about. But I think too, you know, for me, it's highlighted we're probably not that good at actually expecting people to have a bit of personal responsibility. So for me, the Vic SES sort of, you know, being flood ready, hadn't been exposed to that a lot. I know that there's probably people like Cheryl and Ken who've been in this area a lot longer than what I have, so do have that sort of stuff. But even, you know, I put in and asked, like with the emergency management evacuation warnings, do they actually work at night if we've got our phones on, do not disturb, that sort of thing. But I think with those warnings as well, what surprised me was, you know, I think you had the peaking of the flood at 9 o'clock in the morning. And in my house from that time, we could not leave safely. And yet the evacuate now warning came through at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, my husband did actually stop a resident across the road who tried to drive her little car out of her driveway at about 10 o'clock. And she was more worried that, you know, about her car, but she really would have got swept away in that flood water. And so one of our other neighbours actually has moved from Queensland and has good understanding of flood. And I suppose it highlighted to me that, you know, we very much sort of understand bushfires probably because we've had more exposure to them over a lot of years. But for some of us who haven't lived in flood areas, like, you know, it's about some of that knowledge piece that, you know, I think for me, we need to take personal responsibility for. The other thing I suppose I'll say that, you know, we know very well that they can't have a CFA truck at every door. I think, you know, for the SES on that occasion with 9,000 call outs, I think, that, you know, some people perhaps expected that the SES could be there to rescue them. Well, I think that's a bit unrealistic as well. I know that, yeah, people certainly were in bad situation, but it's for me, it's moving forward. How do we actually learn from this so that we get people, you know, including myself, to take a bit more personal responsibility and be able to act?
Thanks for that, Michelle. This is very helpful. You know, all of these different comments and insights, particularly from, you know, you at the coalface, is just yeah, incredibly helpful. I'm going to go to Alphonse. You had your hand up, and then back to you, Ken.
Oh, yes. Look, if I might just make a comment in relation to when the flood arrives, and it arrives for, you know, before everybody knows about it, regardless. But the comment that was made Cheryl in relation to Tennyson Street, etc. May I suggest that they people like the SES perhaps consider a specific plan for the hotspots to simply block off all those streets that are likely hotspots, that they could be readily identified, and all the people who are affected. I live in Maplesome Drive, which is just up from the roundabout from Shakespeare up the Highland Highway. And yes, we experienced exactly the same thing. Down the bottom, the water was the best part of 600 millimetres, 800 millimetres deep. We had semi-trailers coming through there, and they had their own problem. They weren't worried about the water. We had four-wheel drives coming through, videoing the problems, etc. And you know, these areas are very easy to identify. And I think if we had a plan up front, when the flood warnings have been given, you know, action that plan to simply go and put detour signs up, appropriate detour signs. It's a simple solution, and it avoids the problems. Yes, we had the bow wave come up to the front door. Yes, so I would recommend that that plan be given some thought.
Thank you so much. Excellent. It sounds like it's been a very big issue, and one that's recurred in a couple of floods. And I know that there were two very big 1 in a 100-year floods that happened back to back. So from that point of view, in terms of turnaround time, in getting new things in place, probably that hasn't been possible as yet. But obviously this is a great.
Steve,
yes.
Lance here, I can respond to Alphonse if you like in relation to that.
That'd be terrific. Thanks.
We do have, council does have a road management plan in place, and it's on our GIS system, and our staff are fully aware of it. But it just wasn't implemented in a timely manner because of all the competing issues, all the storm stuff, everything that was down, and the quickness of this in this instance. We have got a pre-prepared plan in place of all the road closures from minor, moderate to major. We have got plans to open up certain gate valves when it floods. And we also have bollards in streets that we remove so that people can drive out of flooded streets. So that plan is in place. It just wasn't implemented as quickly as people would have liked.
Yeah. Good on you, Lance. And that's obviously very disappointing for people. And obviously, as you say, there's a lot of things going on at the time. And, you know, it's very disappointing, and hear that disappointment. And obviously, it's something that's being picked up now, looking at ways to sort it through. So thanks, Alphonse. I'll go to you, Ken, as you had your hand up next.
Yes, I guess I've been on the floodplain since 77. So I was here through the 78s, 93s, 95s, 2012, and this one. So I've seen it all. I've seen houses back in 78. They used front-end loaders to come and rescue people, and those people that missed the flood missed their floor by about an inch, in fact had a bow wave go over the floor and flood their house. So I can understand those situations, and in fact even during this particular one, as the water was coming up, we had a stiff southeasterly come up giving us waves of about 2 inches, which had it come up at the peak would have washed into my garage. So yes, the bow waves are a problem. I did share with Lance this afternoon about one of the rescues. There was a rescue down near the squash courts in Traralgon where a man had gone out of the car, and I spoke to the guy that actually rescued him, and he said that he asked him why he drove into the floodwater. He said, look, he was an elderly gentleman, and he said, I saw the sign, it said water over the road. He said, water, I've driven through water over the road before, those signs are always there. So he drove into it and, of course, got his car stuck. So it's understanding that. And I think, as we discussed with Lance earlier, maybe the road closed sign is better for that sort of situation. Council do have those plans in place, and they have done it previous floods. Unfortunately, like he said, this one, they had the signs out, but they weren't put up until basically the water was up around their ankles. As far as floods go, people are saying it's the biggest one since 78. In fact, this one was way bigger than 78, and it's probably the biggest since 52. There is a little bit of difference in the flow rates when the creek was cleaned out, and I think about 83, 85, somewhere around there. The creek was straightened out and large of the banks were taken out. So this flood is probably the biggest in 50 years. So
Wow.
I'm not too sure whether other people are aware of that, but it was actually, I did my measurements the other day, and at my place, which is on the northern end of Traralgon, it was actually 110 mils higher than the 95 flood.
Wow. So this is really great local information. So do you keep some of this data by the sounds of things, Ken?
Look, I've got all the records from 78 with just about every flood. Well, I've only in the last 5 or 6 years been logging the rain events, but rain tends to be the main precursor to know in advance, because in previous floods, the river levels are still rising and the rain is still rising. You don't really know how high it's going to peak. Yeah. So rain events are very important. And probably my biggest gripe is that a lot of the sensors for these do fail, sometimes during the event, sometimes afterwards. And in fact, during this event, the Cornella flood gauge was inaccurate and didn't give us a good response of what was happening at Cornella. So that left the Traralgon South one to give us our warning systems to how actual high it was going to go. And even this, the last couple of days ago, we had that rain event where there's a fair amount of rain. The two gauges, I think, Caligny and Mount Tassie gauges weren't working, so you can only get an average of the rain across a couple of the gauges rather than lots. So I've had a bit of a talk with the Met Bureau also when we're watching these rivers rise. We have to wait for an hour and at 1/4 the hour before we can actually see them on the internet to know whether they're rising, whether they're peaking or turning. And I'm hopefully trying to get them to update that every 15 minutes rather than every hour. So hopefully we can get that. And being able to find that information on the Met Bureau site is probably okay for someone like me that's looked at it for a while. Yeah. But for somebody new to the system, and there are renters that move into the area that don't know anything about the flood situation. So they're the ones that become uninformed and have trouble even understanding it's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, this is just sounds to me like you're right in the center of some incredibly important information that would be just vital to be shared with those kind of people that you're talking about who don't have that that intel or that experience of having been around for a while. So are you feeding this information into those systems? It sounds like, I mean, you're having conversations with the right people.
Yeah, look, I've also got a group of neighbours that I have on my text group messaging. And in fact, it was the Wednesday before the flood that I gave them a warning at 8 o'clock in the morning to say that if we get the rain that is going to be forecast, this flood will be bigger than the 2012 flood. In fact, that was before the rain. Once we got the rain, I knew at 4 o'clock on the morning of the flood, it was going to be the biggest in 50 years. And it turned out to be the case. So it's if you can log the rain and know what it's doing, you get a fair idea.
Thanks very much, Ken. It really goes to Michelle's point about, local responsibility, individual responsibility balanced with, whatever support is coming from agencies as well, because you are getting that information directly. Thank you. I'll go to Kane. Thanks, Kane.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Steve, like some really great local intel that could be actually placed and fed into the Incident Control Centre. And I'm ex-SES, so I've come to BRV about 18 months ago. And local flood observers and people that can feed into the municipal flood emergency plan with this sort of information are absolute gold. So I know Russell and Anthony online. I don't know whether we can grab Ken and other people's details after this and feed into those processes. I think, one of the key policies of SES is local knowledge. So how do we get local knowledge into those incident control centres and make sure we've got that sort of intel?
Certainly agree with Kane, and we'll grab Ken's details and others and have a chat offline. But as Kane indicated, we need the local community members with local knowledge into the Incident Control Centre to feed this particular information in. And I suppose as we review our municipal flood emergency plans and local flood guides as well, is all this local intel is fantastic. So thanks, Ken, for sharing.
Thanks, Russell. I'm going to go to Andrew's question in the chat there. Andrew McIntosh, could you please address which agency is responsible for the ongoing clearing of debris, etc., from the Traralgon Creek, particularly at the Shakespeare, Seymour and Franklin Street bridges? How often the clearing is undertaken, as I believe due to the obstruction within the creek increases causes the floodwaters to rise above the existing creek levels. Is that a CMA question? Who's responsible? It's always interesting to know which agencies get involved at this point. Whose creek is it, and so forth. It's not my debris. Anybody like
this, Steve, again?
Yes, Lance, thank you.
So there's an MOU between the Catchment Management Authority and Latrobe City Council, and it identifies the areas that council are responsible for and measures it all out and what the Catchment Management Authority is responsible for. So the stuff in the creek itself, more or less, in layman's terms, is the responsibility of the Catchment Management Authority. Up on the banks, a bit higher up from the edges of the creek, is council's responsibility in that MOU currently. So there's a little bit of work with the Catchment Management Authority in relation to that.
Adam, do you want to pick that up at all? Thanks, Lance.
Yeah, happy to pick that up if you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so management of creek and what you do about vegetation in creek is a vexed issue, and it's not unique to Traralgon Creek. From a catchment management point of view, our responsibilities are around waterway health, not necessarily around removing vegetation from the waterway, but in fact encouraging vegetation in the waterway, because that's actually important in achieving river health and waterway health, as well as mitigating flood impact. So if you take it to one extreme and you remove all the vegetation from a waterway, you're going to make flooding worse than it actually is now. So it is about achieving a bit of a balance, and we've worked with Latrobe Shire for many years over Traralgon Creek and trying to get the balance right. Obviously, it's difficult to get the balance right 100% of the time, but it's something that we actively look at. We've also got our regional floodplain management strategy that we work with the Shires and Latrobe Shire. And through that process, we analyse what are the priority issues that need addressing in terms of flood mitigation. So if, again, as a result of these floods, if we need to look at that and take a different approach in Traralgon Creek, we can do that.
Thanks for that, Adam. Does anybody else want to just add to that?
I was going to add, just in addition to Adam's comments and Lance's, there is a waterway management strategy that was done some time ago that sets out actions that council will take and other agencies take. So that's something, I suppose, after any event like this, something worth having a review of. I think Andrew's comment, I'm not sure it was about more so debris that might have accumulated, such as rather than grown there, Adam. So I think we had done some clearing of some of that recently. I know we do take a lot of shopping trolleys out of there, unfortunately. People tend to dump those in. It's a perennial issue for us. But in terms of vegetation that might have washed down, as in a tree trunk or the like that's come down the waterway, sometimes they do get left. I'm not quite sure. They might also add to river health, as you said, in terms of providing for aquatic fauna to be in them as well. But it's something that I suppose that when I read Andrew's question, might have been a little bit more around that as well, in terms of trees that might have washed down that might cause blockages.
I think that's right. I think, and Michelle's added there that it's the large dead trees that have come down, particularly the ones that have come down through the storm, that are the concern. There was someone yesterday talking about the trees being washed down and actually affecting the bridge because of the weight of those trees. So he mentioned that those trees were cleared in another creek. So I'm just wondering what the situation is there. Anybody who was at that meeting yesterday? They get cleared sometimes, these big trees.
Yeah, Steve, it's Kane here. In some instances, you know, we had an example yesterday in Wellington where the road runs through the national park. So you can't actually take the timber away. So what was happening was the road authority, being regional roads, was cutting the trees off the road and throwing them over the side of the road into the creek. And then it rained and they're all blocking up against the bridge. So there's different situations depending on different land management responses. But yeah, I guess, they're just different situations, and different people own different parts of the river system or manage different parts of the river system. So it can get quite complex, but I don't know, Adam, where you see that there is, likely impacts. You can't do anything about it as a tree's falling in the river during a storm, but when it is likely to impact bridges, I know, particularly on public land, having worked in that area, they will remove some of the trees if we know it's going to impact a public asset or a private asset. But it just depends on the land management tenure, basically.
And I guess that's, part of, again, this conversation where you bring all of these different agencies together with the community feeding in here at these issues. These conversations will continue after this meeting because obviously, things are thrown up and they can't be sorted out on the spot, but the conversations continue to work out how these various things are going to be dealt with. So thank you. Any more of these?
Steve, with that issue, I'm happy to work with council and CMA and Vic Roads and others if we need to, and just have a look at that issue and take that offline.
Good on you. Thanks, Kane. Excellent. Other questions? All these questions are being captured, and the comments, that's a note there from Cass in the chat there. So all of this is going to be very useful grist for the mill. Other things that people have experienced would be great to hear. We've got 12 minutes left. So, if you've got a question that you've been, really keen to ask, now's your chance. Yes,
hi, Steve.
okay.
It's Ingrid.
Yeah,
it's Ingrid.
Over to you.
Yeah. Oh, hang on. What was I going to say? I was just wondering, is there a pamphlet like the council can give us for future events? Because we've rang the council several times and we've got told this is our department, but they can't tell us what department we have to go to. Is there something that the council could provide us with?
So this pamphlet would be a pamphlet. Which what would it? What are you thinking about particularly? Just about different issues.
I can jump in there, Steve.
Yeah.
Somebody else was talking there. Sorry to hear of your experience there, Ingrid, that you were told it wasn't. Generally, I find in terms of our contact centre staff, they generally have pretty good information about what's available for people. We do get lots of calls for other agencies, often regional roads and others, as an example. But in this instance, there is I'm fairly certain I've seen it on our website. It's a document that explains from, I think it's the SES one, that explains what to do and how to stay in tune with warnings and the like. And so there was, I think Lance might have touched on, there was a previous version of that some time back when council managed, for example, the warning system. This one is more specific when the responsibilities change. It spells out some detail. I think it's only 1 or 2 pages from memory. I've definitely seen it on our website because I downloaded it some time ago. So we can put that up on our website for make it available for people if it isn't still there. But I have seen that as an example.
Okay, no, that'll
provide some guidance. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that would be good because the main concern was with the silage. We rang council several times because we had a lot of silage from the farm across the road and we kept getting fobbed off to different, departments. Sorry, it's not ours. And then my husband, who's had 2 cardiac arrests, he eventually went and did it all. So it wasn't good for his health.
That's shocking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope your husband's all right now.
No, he's not.
He's getting better. He's still quite stressed from the whole events and everything, but we're getting there slowly. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Ingrid, and hopefully that information will be useful. Ken. Oh, sorry, was there somebody else wanted to jump in?
Was that a call for Ken then, wasn't it?
Yes.
No, it was only me, Russ. Steve, I'll just let Ken go. I'll let Ken go first. That's fine.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I'm still fishing for, I guess, is one is what size flood was this by classification? I'm understanding it was a 1 in 70 year flood. 2 is what sort of flow rates did we have? Was it around the 17,000 megalitres per day? and understanding, I believe, that the 100-year flood is 21,000 megalitres a day. With that in mind, from my understanding, most of the houses built to council regulation are built 300 mil above what I believe to be the 100-year flood. And in fact, the majority of the people I spoke to with relatively newer houses or built to those standards, they all missed their floor by 100 mil. So I'm just wondering, going forward, if we do have a 100-year flood, how many houses would have water over the floor? I'm not too sure how many houses had water over the floor under this event. I haven't seen that figure published yet. It would be fairly catastrophic, I think, if we had a 100-year flood rather than the 70-year flood. So I'll be interested. I guess Adam Dunn probably has some of that information. I can probably catch him offline sometime and he can let me know what that is.
Thanks. Thanks, Ken. Adam, do you want to catch up with Ken and talk more about that?
More than happy to catch up with Ken at any time. So, yeah, we can go through all of those specifics whenever you're up for it, Ken.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, mate.
Excellent. Thank you. Russell, did you want to add anything?
I was just going to let Ingrid know that we do have a local flood guide for Traralgon. So I'm not sure whether you're aware of that, but we did do a new one and that's been circulated. So we're going to put the link up on the website or share the link so people can get access to the new local flood guide for Traralgon.
Which website will that go on, Russell?
Are you going to pop it up, Steve, on the Latrobes, or because at the moment we've got it on the SES website, but
we can, I think, if it's not already on there, Russell, we can provide a link to it. That was the one I was trying to reference before, which is a more localised flood guide. So you said that in the
I suppose, and I suppose what occurred to Ingrid is that we had the challenging times of COVID. So when the flood was the flood guide was being developed in and community consultation, etc., we had to do it in a COVID way, which meant that it had to be done online rather than in person and the like. So that was a bit of challenge there. But there is a local flood guide available, and I think the link's just being posted now. So you can reference that. But we'll be definitely doing a bit more engagement around that now that some of the restrictions are being lifted from COVID.
Thanks, Russell. There's another link put up there by Rebecca from the Latrobe City Council, which was in answer to your question too, Ingrid. So make sure you check that out. That might be the one.
Yeah, that is the one, Russell. I had my team send me a message to say it is on there. So they've just provided that link.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. We're closing out. Michelle, one last question.
Look, mine's probably just a comment. I just want to acknowledge and thank the Shire and the Red Cross in terms of pretty much straight away the next day. I think there was people from the Red Cross doing psychological first aid and checking in on people, and then we had follow-up visit by the Shire asking what impact was, that sort of thing. And an offer, for blaze aid, which came pretty quickly, which, we did have fences down, but we didn't require that assistance. So I think it's important to sort of acknowledge that it was challenging in it. It was a bit like an entertainment factor in many of our streets with lots of people looking around and visiting, and that was not very welcome. And we did have some stuff stolen, but I think there was real efforts by the Shire to sort of check in, and the Red Cross agency, I think we had 2 visits in the first 3 days from them. So I really sort of want to just acknowledge that and thank whoever organised that, I suppose.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. That's rubbing salt into the wound to have things stolen. So not a good outcome there, but yeah, good on you for that comment. Alphonse, did you want to say something in closing?
Yes, if I may, thank you. In relation to comments that were made before regarding the flood classification, etc., Alan Dunn was, I think, partly responsible for the very good report from 2016 in relation to all the flooding and mitigation thereof. It states that a 1% flood was 5.99 metres at Traralgon Creek, and 2% is 5.59 or 5.6. In the flood we've just had, it was 5.78. So close to 5. And that, in other words, 1%, 2%, and this one is in the middle, 1.5. and hence 1 in 75 is the answer there.
Right.
That report is very good. It has a lot of historic flood information, and I would recommend it for anybody to read. It's on the net, and it's called the Traralgon Flood Study Summary Report from 2016. If Alan's still there, he can tell you all about it, because I think he was in very many ways responsible for it from the catchment authority's viewpoint.
Good on you, Alphonse. Thanks very much for that. I see Ken, I think, was taking notes there. Ken, did you want to add anything as a last comment?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Alphonse for that. I've probably actually got a copy of it here, but hadn't referenced it to see exactly what it was. But I'd also like to thank the people. The Red Cross were very good with their responses during the flood, and also council. I'd like to give compliments to them and their cleanups. They came around and gave us a lot of help in picking up the debris around the perimeter of the property and everything. So there was a good response from that. There was a repair to the roads, was done very promptly. So I'd like to pass my appreciation on to the council for all of that, and also the Red Cross.
Good on you, Ken. Thank you very much. Good way to kind of close out the meeting. And thank you all for coming along tonight from the community and really providing some valuable information that's all been recorded and will help obviously shape the next steps and changes to systems that are in place at the moment to ensure that things are improving over time. And that's the most important thing. A big shout out to those agencies who are here who perhaps haven't spoken at all, but have just been here just in case there are questions that have been directed to them. So that's a big commitment and much appreciated. And yeah, finally, just a reminder. It's come through a few times on the chat, but please do visit the council's website. There's a lot of things now going on that, and obviously updates, anything that's come through. There'll be the questions that have been answered. A Q&A document will be available, and yeah, stay in touch and keep being part of the solutions to all of this, because it's just vital to have people in the community who can see what the problems are. Any other closing comments from anyone else? BRV, council?
Steve, if I could just make a small comment here. Recovery process, it's wonderful. A lot of people do enormous work, etc. But there is one major item that I think is important. That is this: no one is looking forward to the next flood. No. However, you be sure it's going to occur, and each time it's higher. Flood mitigation is the other side of the coin, and can I recommend to everyone that some thought be put into that, because that is the future for Traralgon. It is not the best recovery in the world, can only recover an incident where there's human suffering and tragedy, and it's going to get worse. Flood mitigation is the ultimate answer to this problem.
Good on you, Alphonse.
Thank you for allowing me to say that.
Yep, good on you, and vital. A good sobering comment to finish things off. And I'm going to close it there. I know there's another question, or Lance,
you want to
say something?
Response to that, which I wouldn't mind just commenting on as well, Steve, just in terms of Alphonse's comment. So council has been looking at, has in the past looked at a range of strategies around what flood mitigation could look like. So it is something we're exploring. Obviously, the sort of things that would deliver sustainable flood mitigation would be longer term actions and very, very costly, and that wouldn't be within the realms of what council could fund. But we are looking at some options and want to have further conversations with the government around that. So it is something that's on the agenda for consideration.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to call it there, unless, Lance, you're absolutely got vital pieces of new information there.
It's just the consideration for the committee members to be on the recovery committee, the community recovery committee, when it's formed in October. So we'll get more information out to the community and invite them to be part of that recovery committee.
Good on you, Lance. Thanks very much. And again, thanks to everybody for being here. Stay in touch and look at those updates. Great to have you here tonight. Thanks, everyone.